So this is an updated version of assignment 3.3, use content-aware scaling. The picture with the four Marines that starts out as a horizontal and needs to be made into a square while not cutting off any parts of the image that we don't want to. So let me start by first of all saving the image that we'll be working with, usmc.jpg. I'm right-clicking on it, telling it to save the link, and I'm going to save it on my desktop. And actually I already have one here called USMC. I'll just replace it. You can just call it whatever you want as long as you can find it. And since there was something already there, yes, I'm going to replace it. I'm using a PC for this assignment, but the directions are very similar on a Mac. More likely than not, you'll be using Command as opposed to Control, Option as opposed to the Alt key. Very few differences. So now that I have saved my image, I went to my Photoshop, telling it to open the file that I saved on my desktop. I'm already on desktop, and I call it USMC, and it's right here. I'm going to open that, and here's the Marines. By the way, I already have my rulers open. If you don't see rulers like I do on top and on the left, there's only two rulers that you can see in Photoshop, the vertical and horizontal. You can click Window and make sure that you check rulers. And actually, no, that's not the case. You will go to View, the View menu, and tell it to show you the rulers. Control R is a shortcut. Mine already has the check mark on it, so they were visible. I unclicked it, but I'll click it again, and now I have rulers. So the first thing that I want to do is, since the objective of this exercise, you have a horizontal picture and you want to convert it into a square while not necessarily cutting off certain parts of the image. First you have to determine what your square is going to look like. That's where the rulers are going to help us. So I am selecting the marquee tool, the rectangular marquee on top, just the second tool from the top. And while I can just click and drag and take notice of the numbers that are appearing on the lower right of the corner, as long as they're the same one, square by square, then you know you have a square. You can help out the ruler by clicking Shift. That way it will try to do a square the whole time. See how mine are 7.25 inches, 7¼ inch square, and I'll let go. Something that I've experienced with students is that, and this is multiple students, they are a little bit shy, gun shy, I think, about how to use the tools. You're not going to select too much or too little if you just click anywhere and drag all the way across, because you can always change your selection. What I mean by that is, if you're trying to draw a square, don't be thinking, oh wait, is this a square, is this not a square, and you know, spend way too much time thinking about it, as opposed to just if you notice where I am on the top left of the screen, I'm not touching the picture at all, because it's not important to be inside the picture. What's important is where your selection is going to end up as. If you try to select something outside of the image, you will get nothing. You'll see that right now, even though I'm trying to draw a square outside, it's telling me that the area selected is 0 by 0. But as soon as I go into the image, it turns into real numbers. And at that point, I can press the Shift key, and then I can trust that this is a square, 7¼ by 7¼ I let go of the mouse button first. I'm still holding the Shift key. Now I let go of the Shift key, and I can move the square by hovering on top of it and clicking and dragging it over. I stop where that horizontal rule appears, and it tells me basically you are at the middle of the screen. I'll let go of the mouse button, and my selection is now a square in the middle of the screen, at least in the middle of this picture. That's where the problem arises. At the bottom right, we're cutting off this part of the image that we don't want. We don't want to chop off the toes of this Marine, and we don't want to chop off the heels of this Marine on the left. So in order to figure out, or at least to remember where the square is, I'm going to hover over to the ruler, and once again, don't be shy about just clicking. See how my my arrow is right in the middle of the ruler. It's between the 2 and the 3, but that's not what matters. It's in between the edge of the application and the edge of the ruler. I don't want it to be that shape. I don't want it to be an arrow pointing outside to another tool. I want it to be right in the middle of the ruler so that when I click, hold down the mouse button and drag it, it will just snap into place. And although there's no noise being made, you should be able to sort of feel, and I'm using an air quote to say feel because it just sort of snaps right in there. It'll stop. Mine is stopping at 1.375, so it's about 1 and what, like 3/8, and I'll let go of the mouse button, and that way I get this artificial ruler pointing from top to bottom. I'll do the same thing again, and I'll click on the ruler and drag all the way to the right. This one goes all the way to 8.625 inches. Don't spend too much time trying to match the numbers that I'm telling you. If you are in the middle, they should just snap on their own. And if yours are a little bit different, well, maybe your settings are somewhat different. Maybe your rulers are not in the same place. So as long as you're nearby and as long as you know that this is a square, that's what's important. If I press Command D or Control D right now, or even better, go to the select menu and tell it to deselect, this will tell you what the shortcut is. I'm on a PC, so it's Control D. And the selection disappears. The rulers stay behind, and I'll use those when the time comes. So now what needs to happen next is I need to make my selections in the channel so that we have something to protect when we scrunch down this image. And by now we've been using layers. Make sure that you are on window, layers, and most importantly channels also. I mentioned them separately because right now you can see my layers on the right side. You can see that the channels are also grayed out. If I were to click on channels, then they appear, but I point at the window that this is also another place where you can go and find channels and layers. Just that one of them, at least on default mode, only one of them will appear. You could move them later if you wanted to, but not so important that you get to see both of them. Except for this exercise, you might want to keep track of where they are. When you get your channels open, you'll see that there's actually 3 channels open. There's 4 layers of channels. They're not layers necessarily, it's just that this is how Photoshop recognizes colors, is by the amount of information inside of each one of these channels. And I say 3 channels, although there's the four layers, because it's the blue channel, blue, green, and red, better known as RGB, red, green, and blue. These are the colors that will actually give us the image that we want with all the colors that we want. We can see them one at a time where the information is, or we can see them all at once by clicking on RGB. These channels currently not so important because I need to take advantage of the fact that I can have a channel that is something that's open here that only has very limited information. I'm going to create an area around the Marines that will help them get protected when we make some changes later. So let me get a new channel by clicking on this icon. It's at the bottom right of the screen. Create new channel. You can't see the extra information at the bottom of the screen. I'm a little bit way too low down here, but maybe for the sake of this assignment I'll put it up a little bit here so that you can see that when I hover on top of that it says create new channel. You can't see the word channel, but trust me, that's what it says. So I'll click on it. I create a new channel. It's called Alpha 1. You could change the name of the channel if you want. The Marines have disappeared from sight, at least. It's not that they're not there. It's just that now Alpha 1, which contains nothing except the background color, which at my setting is for black. That's the only thing I can see. If I wanted to see the Marines again, I would have to click on RGB, which I recommend you do. Alpha 1 gets hidden. It doesn't disappear. It's actually just hidden. The eyeball next to it, the channel visibility is turned off. And that's fine because although we're going to be working inside of this channel, we don't need to see what's going on just yet. So in order to make this protective barrier that I keep on talking about, I'm going to go and select the lasso tool and click and hold the lasso tool and then select the polygonal lasso tool. We've used this in another assignment before, and it's just a real simple way of making a selection around an image. In this case, what I want to do is I want to make a selection all the way around the Marines so that they can be protected on a layer. So rather than me just telling you about it, let me do it. Doesn't matter where you start as long as you finish where you started. So I'm going to start above the cap of this one soldier, and don't try to select. Don't get too cropped, too close into the image. You don't want to cut them out. You want to select an area around them. Let me zoom in a little bit more so that you can see what I mean. I'm going to use the zoom tool real quick, and I will zoom out in a second. But rather than doing what we did with another exercise, which was basically trying to select them like this, don't do that. That's too close, and in the end that wouldn't help us. I'm going to press escape so that I can start. Unfortunately, with this tool you have only one shot to go all the way around. If you mess up, if you make a mistake, just press escape and start again. So I'm gonna give it, and just based on over here what you see on the rulers, you don't have to be precise, but I'm guessing that I may be 1/4 of an inch away from the Marine. I click once, and then I'm going to click around, and I'm going to try to keep a similar, not necessarily the same, just similar distance away from the subject. That includes anything that the Marine is holding, be it the flag or the rifle or the shoes, anything that is a crop close part of it. I'm going to swing around, and I'll tell you what, rather than me narrating the whole thing, I'm just going to keep on doing this until I'm done, and then I'll come back to you. Although I can't tell you that part of the reason why we want to make sure that areas around it are selected is because you see this lake, you see these trees, all this mountain. We want to make sure that they're included also in the area that's protected. And that'll make a lot more sense when we actually use the Content Aware tool. Please notice that we're not doing the Marines separate. It's going to be all one big selection around them. Maybe you notice that even though my area is zoomed in, if I don't click anything, I just move the mouse toward the bottom of the screen or to the left or wherever it is that I need to get more space, Photoshop will automatically shift the image for me. If I had a camera to point at my hands, I would have an image, or rather a video feed of what I'm doing on the screen, or rather on the keyboard. Okay, so now, like I said, we want to end where we started. As soon as I get close to the point of origin, you'll notice that the tool gets a little circle added to it. That means that I can click and I will get the selection going, the marching ants. I'm pressing Control-0, Command-0 on your Mac, and I can see my selection is made. And which is good because I can go and click on the alpha channel and the channels and fill this area with white. So easiest way is to, while the selection is going, click on Edit and Fill, and the contents will not be content aware. There will be just the color white. I'm going to click on the arrow and select white at the bottom. The blending mode is normal, the opacity is 100. Hopefully that's your default, and unless you've done other projects, you won't need to worry about changing that. I'll click OK, and now my selection is filled with white. and I can tell that that's happening in the alpha channel. I will now click on the RGB channel so I can see the color. You'll notice that then this is still there, but it's not really relevant to our work just yet. And my selection is still happening, so I'll go to select menu and tell it to deselect. Control D, this is a shortcut on a PC, Command D on your Mac. So I'll go back to layers. I could either click on the layers tab over here or click on window layers, whichever one benefits you most. The background is the only thing that we have as far as layers are concerned. So at this point, I guess is where I would tell you, well, why didn't we just crop this image for starters? We have cropping tools, and as a matter of fact we do. We have one tool just for cropping, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's fifth from the top on my screen, the crop tool. Shortcut is C. And since I had already placed this image right in the middle, it knows that that's the middle and that's a square. It's a square mostly because in the top dashboard is this caret. Mine already says square, maybe yours says ratio. Ratio, it could be a 1-to-1 ratio, wouldn't matter how many inches across or vertical it is, as long as it's a 1-by-1. We're not doing that. We're not doing the resolution, or rather the width by height by resolution, or the 1-by-1 square even, which is what I had for starters. Because if I were to do this, to apply this, I could either double click or click on the check mark to say yes, do that. Because then now I lose the feet and I lose the heel, and my square image is not what I wanted. I will go to the edit menu and tell it to undo that crop and save the image back. You could also always keep track on your history, go back to whatever you want to correct. I'll get rid of that for now. So although I could still also use the rectangular marquee tool to click and drag across and say, okay, well, I have this square 7¼ inch, I can try to crop it, image crop, but the same problem happens. So I will use the shortcut Control Z, Command Z on the Mac, and not worry about the selection for now. So I just click somewhere else and deselect it. You could have also gone to select, deselect, and get rid of the selection. So all along what we're trying to do is make this a square from a rectangle. We could have, because this will come into play, selected the whole thing, and I can go to select and say select all, and there's a couple of tools that are very commonly used. If you go to the edit menu, there is the free transform tool. It's Control T, Command T on the Mac, and when you use the free transform, these anchors appear on the corners and on the sides of the image. At this point, it will allow you to click and drag in and make the image smaller or larger. This is the main reason why you're getting this new version of the of this video. It's that when you do that, as opposed to the old instructions, the whole image changes. I'm going to press Escape to undo what I just did. I'll press Control T, Command T on the Mac. And when I want to do this from the sides, I need to press and hold the Shift key, and then that way I can actually do a real transform. I can do it from any corner, from the sides, but the same problem arises as did before, and that is that we're making the image too skinny within, and that's not what we want either. So I'm going to press Escape to get the Marines back, and I'm going to use the tool that is the whole basis of this assignment. In the edit menu, I'm going to find the content aware scale. Very long shortcut here. You have to press 4 keys. So I'll just click on that. And as I've shown you in the previous video, even if you press and hold the Shift key, you get a little bit of a better reduction whenever you do this because you're using the tool. You'll notice how the Marines are trying to shift and sort of stay together, but there's something terribly wrong still because they're getting too thin, even though the mountains, the lake, the grass is doing a lot better job. Even though I'm scrunching them all the way down here, you can still sort of tell that they're different images, except they're getting to be too close to each other. I'll press escape one last time. And so when I want to use edit content aware scale, and I have the area protected in the channels in alpha 1, I want to make sure that this comes into play. So I don't need to do anything with the channels per se. I could be in layers and still work, but because I'm using the content aware scale, I can click on the protect caret and say protect channel alpha 1. And by clicking that, that's an internal selection. I'm going to press and hold the shift key, and then from the left side I'm going to bring in the image and then do the same thing from the right. And I'll do it, and that I may have to, and I probably will have to, do the same thing from the left and right several times until I can get all the Marines inside of the picture. Once again, the image is snapping onto the ruler that I drew before, so I can tell that this is actually a square. And now I have a square image that has the Marines all complete inside of the square, and they are not being squished into the image. Everything else though around them collapsed and made the image square without making it look out of proportion. So to complete this assignment, now that I have made this change using the tool, I want to make sure that this is applied, and while my selection is going, I will click on the check mark at the top. You could also press enter or double click on the image, and then that will apply the changes. While I have my selections tool still open, I'm going to go to the image menu and tell it to do image and crop, and then that way it will get rid of all the sides. If you want to get rid of the rulers that were there, let me zoom out a little bit so that I can see better, pressing Control minus. Let me select and deselect these rulers. They're blue on my screen, maybe they're purple on yours. They're a throwback from the past. It used to be that in print, if you drew a light blue line or mark or something, that cameras couldn't see it, and I'm pretty sure they still can't. And these lines will not be printed if you try to print this image. But if you want to get rid of them, simply use the move tool, hover on top of the ruler. It'll change shape so that when you click, hold down the mouse button and drag it, and it will disappear. You have to take it all the way to the ruler, and it would have to be to the ruler where it came from. You can't take it up. The top ruler will not take it. Cancel that. And so that's it. That's the assignment. And if I can zoom in properly, which I can with the zoom tool down here, then now I see my finished product. You can please save this, save as a PSD file. Don't save it as a JPEG. Name it anything you want. Be sure to recognize that you turn it in, and grade you for it. Sorry that this is a longer video than the original one, but usually when we do this on a face-to-face, it takes most of the class time, which could be up to an hour.